Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hello. Hi. Okay, we're gonna get this show on the road. We're apparently already a little bit behind schedule, but that's okay. We're gonna pick it up. I don't know about you guys, but now I'm slightly traumatized by the term man-vegetable being lodged into my brain for the rest of my life. And I don't know that we're gonna be quite as interesting as that, but I know that AI and cybersecurity is super hot right now. So I'd like to invite the panelists to come and take the stage, and hopefully we're gonna break down some myths and drop some hard truths about AI and cyber and what it all means. If that is not what you were expecting to hear today, now is your chance to make a break for the exit, but I hope that you'll all stay because I think this is going to be a really fun discussion. Okay, so welcome, gentlemen. My name is Vivienne. If I haven't met any of you before, I'm a distinguished full-stack architect at TD Bank, where I lead a cyber architecture team. I've been fairly outspoken, both in my organization and at the CyberX event in the fall, about my skepticism about AI and cyber, and that is my opening position here today. I have serious concerns about the use of this technology in cybersecurity. George, in the welcoming keynotes, talked about it as a double-edged sword, and something that poses potent risks as well as some opportunity. And that's exactly what we're here to discuss in this panel. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panelists and have each of you give us the 1-minute intro on who you are and what you do. Mayuran?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Mayuran. I am the CISO of Kepler Communications. So Kepler, for those of you who may not be aware, we design, build, launch, and operate satellites, which I think is pretty cool.
Wow.
Is this working? Yep. Hi, I'm Christopher Fielder. I'm the field CTO at Arctic Wolf. We are a vendor-neutral security operations company, and I've been in cybersecurity for going on 24 years now.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Dana Reed. My name is Dana Reed. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado. I work for Sailpoint Technologies. We are in identity and access management, leader in the in that field, and we're using AI, I think, in some really interesting ways that I'm excited to talk about as we go forward.
Excellent. So in case you hadn't noticed, we've got a diversity of viewpoints from the cybersecurity industry here. Okay, we've got security operations, we have a security solutions vendor, and then we have Kepler, whose security concerns are just a little bit different from everyone else. But it starts to speak to some of the concerns about control systems and critical infrastructure and those aspects that typical IT security doesn't think about. So in our pre-call, everyone had some pretty diverse viewpoints about this, and I'm just going to come out and say it. Personally, I think the AI is way hotter than it deserves to be in our industry. There's a lot of potential, and there's been a lot of buzz, particularly around generative AI. But for my organization and for a number of other organizations, Canadian banks, for example, tend to be very conservative about these things. The risk looks far greater than the potential opportunities. So I'm very interested in hearing from each of you about how you've leveraged AI to solve specific problems in the cybersecurity domain. Dana, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So within the identity management space, it's interesting, right? We manage who has access to what in an organization and why and how and for how long, et cetera. So we can actually look at individuals and look at what access they have in common with other people recursively throughout the entire organization. And we can almost make assumptions in a standard social structure like high school or anywhere else, a standard corporate environment, that people that have similar access have similar job function. And so we can actually do things like role modeling and those things better. We can identify anomaly better, things that you have that other people that do your same job don't have. It begs the question of why. We can also then identify the things that you have in common and maybe build out better roles and those types of things, better efficiencies for birthright access, that type of stuff. If you want to get technical, it's what's called a homophilic environment with high modality. It means that people in marketing have similar access as people in marketing, and people in finance have similar access to people in finance. Just like in high school, the people that are in the band have similar things like instruments and uniforms, and the people on the football team or whatever it is have very opposite types of entitlements. So we can utilize data science to do this kind of interesting thing. And this kind of goes back to your question earlier, your point. Identity management is moving in a world, there's way too much to govern. So the idea of what we're doing now is moving the application to more of an insight-driven application. We're moving you from what I call assisted identity, meaning like you just give you a screen and data, and the end user in the chair has to figure out what's going on. Ideally, we want to get to this autonomous world, right? Well, that's where I think the promise of AI, we may never attain that, but that's where we want to go. But the way we're using identity, using AI, and I really want to call it data science right now, is about presenting what I call an augmented world. It's that middle ground of we now generate the insight, deliver that to the end user, the admin, the manager, the business, whoever it is, and they can then act upon that insight in some sort of binary positive way, whether it's removing someone's access because they don't need it, whether it's adjusting a role's contents because all of these people have been requesting this access since the role was generated. And we're looking at things like activity data to combat the AI issue around what can we get rid of a role. AI is helping us make roles and access larger. It's helping us identify anomaly. But usage and those types of things, it helps combat the idea of just because everybody has it doesn't mean anybody actually needs it or they use it. So there's this, I can go on and on here, but there's a lot of interesting stuff that we're doing. I think data science fits really, really well in this space where risk mitigation and access allocation actually merge, and we can actually identify anomaly on both sides of that and commonality.
I think that's really interesting because if anyone's been listening to all the messaging around zero trust, least privilege access is kind of, the holy grail of modern identity and access management. But how do you actually do that? I literally met with a vendor, not you guys, I literally met with a vendor about, 2 months ago who was showing us their example of a least privilege access model. And it's basically this super granular one-to-one. And I was like, okay, that works, but how do you maintain this? And their answer was automation, tons and tons of automation. I'm like, okay, I get it, but it's not realistic for most people, and I can't imagine like the effort to get there. So the idea of leveraging data science and AI to do that profiling and to surface those things, that's very interesting to me. Chris, yes. Can you talk about what you guys are doing with AI at Arctic Wolf?
Sure. So we focus on the human element of security operations, and we don't want to take humans out of that. We think that's so important. So we're being very methodical in our approach to the utilization of AI. We have some AI detection capabilities in our blend of how we detect threats, but we don't want to go all in on AI-based detections because then the humans that we have will be doing nothing but correcting the mistakes of AI. Training models, and that's not what we want them to do. It's about faster time to value. So we're doing a lot of research and looking at, well, how do we empower our people with AI without distracting our people with AI? So we're saying, how about if we find the way to, an alert comes in. A lot of times alerts that come in from some vendors that are out there are very general. There's not a lot of information. And so our people have to research, well, what does this actually mean? And what is it going to do? Well, how about if we use some of this AI, large language models, generative AI, to say, well, let's supplement those alerts that come in and say, well, these are some recommendations. This is more information on what this means. And maybe there's even some remediation steps in there that they can utilize. But we don't want to go as far as, say, automated remediation with AI because that's going to cause more problems as well. AI that's going to go through and fully remediate for you, you better hope that is basically 100% across the board, because when you're looking at what AI is doing, it doesn't have the same context as what humans would have. Examples I give are, let's say it's Friday evening and it sees that there is exfiltration taking place. And so the AI is going to go, well, let's go ahead and contain those machines, right? And let's shut them down. But it doesn't have the context to go, okay, well, those machines that are running on that Friday evening are e-commerce machines that are possibly doing millions of dollars worth of transactions in the hour for exfiltrating data that, when you look at it a little bit deeper, might not have a lot of value to it. So that wasn't the right step to take. Humans have to understand that. I actually was watching a video the other day where somebody was using AI to generate they said, okay, create a kid's TV show just, that you think would be a very big hit. And so AI created this show about puppets coming to life and interacting with kids. And what they accidentally generated was the scariest horror movie I've ever seen in my life. Because again, AI doesn't have that context that humans have. So we're saying, okay, well, how do we again use this to get faster time to value, to supplement our people, but not take people out of the equation and not make it more difficult on people as well, which I think a lot of people are overcorrecting on AI right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance there that machines just don't have. Part of my anxiety about generative AI in particular is that generative AI, by definition, is a non-deterministic model, right? You can feed it the exact same inputs, and person to person, session to session, minute to minute, there's no guarantee you're going to get the same outcome. And as a technologist, this makes me anxious. My husband would say there's other reasons this makes me anxious, but this makes me very, very anxious. But the way that you're leveraging it to supplement incident response, this seems appropriate to me, right? And that you're using it in a way that augments and complements human decision-making and human cognition. This is something that I find appealing as well.
We have an R&D project right now that's saying, okay, well, let's look at the start to finish of how our people respond to these threats. And where is there an opportunity for us to make it faster? And one is, okay, well, they determine the threat. Now they have to talk to the individual and say, this is what we recommend we do from here. And that's going to take time for them to identify what should be done and then write that out. Well, what if this generative AI can say, well, here's some suggestions on what you could say, and they can pull from that. Now, they're not going to immediately copy and paste, because again, they could be copying and pasting problems, but it gives them a faster starting point and again, faster time to value.
Oh, sure. Talking to humans is really hard.
Absolutely.
Absolutely it is. Myron, can you tell us about what you guys are doing
Yeah, sure.
about AI?
I don't know. For me, AI has been there for a while. We've had tools in the past that uses automated remediation, detection. It's become a buzz now in the last 18 months or so. One of the things that we at Kepler are working on today actually stemmed out of something that happened within the company. So there was obviously, certain groups of people ended up putting some IP on ChatGPT to try to get some code out, to try and debug that code, and kind of floated up all the way to me. We started rolling things out. So what we're building out now today at Kepler is we're actually building out an internal AI system within the organization. And we're actually building out the AI system to feed in test cases for SDLC for embedded systems. So we don't have to write these test cases anymore. We have a bunch of smart programmers, software developers. They're throwing in all the information. It's generating all those test cases based on the results it's pumping out. We're still testing it, but that's an area that we're working on pretty strongly right now.
Yeah, I love that, to use it for test case generation, because that is something, a narrow AI model with the benefit of some large language capabilities. It's absolutely capable of doing in terms of making sure you get the right test coverage and cover all the right edges in your testing scenarios. I love that use of it. I think it's interesting that the couple of mentions we've had of ChatGPT so far in this panel have been of what not to do. I remember very famously, when all the buzz about ChatGPT hit, there was a point, I don't know if anyone remembers this, where ChatGPT started giving people Amazon recommendations based on the questions they had posed. Yeah. And it's hilarious, but from a security point of view, it's terrifying, because that means that somebody at Amazon put some of their code into ChatGPT. And I don't know what happened, but I'm sure somebody was disciplined for that, right? This is not okay. And this is a really good segue into the next thing I wanted us to discuss, which is, what are the risks that people are exposing themselves to when you start leveraging AI, and how do you mitigate it? Some of the things, particularly with large language models and ChatGPT, some of the things that my organization and many others are concerned about is, how do you detect and deal with those hallucinations? How do you deal with the leak of sensitive data and continue to protect your intellectual property? Because spoiler alert, there's no protection for anything you put into ChatGPT. You've just given them your data, or your procedures, your IP. So what are the risks that people need to be aware of, and how can you mitigate that when you start on your AI journey? I'll just let you guys jump in and any.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think, obviously we're talking about AI bias and those types of things. To your point earlier, there's a book, if you're looking for a great book to read, it's an old school book, but it's called The Clock of the Long Now. And they talk about the singularity theory, and the idea is that as time moves on, the amount of, we accelerate how fast information is accumulated on Earth amongst humans, right? ChatGPT is based off of a data set which is years old. Like ChatGPT kind of is like a perpetual sixth grader. Like it never, even though it's 10 now or 20, it's, so there is.
I live with a sixth grader, absolutely true.
So absolutely. The knowledge that it provides you is actually 4 years old, right? And so there is some bias there. Now, in the identity world, we actually had kind of a really interesting thing that happened to us when we started looking at AI application or data science application to access certifications. Manager goes in, gets all the access of their people. They have to certify whether this is appropriate access or not appropriate access. And so, of course, they go in and they say yes or no. A very ineffective but very efficient use of your time is simply to go in and click select all, auto approve, and go on with your day. The problem with that, when you apply that to AI, is the first thing someone says is, well, if I've approved this 5 times in a row, can you just not even show it to me? Because it's obviously true that this person needs this access. So reinforcement learning actually would have introduced a bias because you never looked at it in the first place. So all we would have done is recommended everything to all of our users simply because you did a select all auto approve in the first place. That's why we had to choose specifically peer group based analysis around AI. Maybe one day we will get to reinforcement learning once peer group analysis does its work, but peer group analysis was the only way in which we could say this is really an unbiased look at what an organization's users have access to, and then recursively how we bundle that access together. So there's definitely, I think AI is a broad subject. There are a lot of swim lanes of it, and you just have to be very, very careful as to what you choose and try to understand to the best of your ability. Amazon was a great example, right? They used resumes of former employees to figure out who would be a good future employee. Remarkably, a bunch of white men showed up, right? And so, because that's who they had hired in the past. And so you had to, and they literally used the pictures of people, and AI just thought that, hey, I guess apparently white men need to work here, because it doesn't know contextually that has no significance to actually what's going on.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that drives me crazy as a technologist when I'm talking to non-technical people is the conflation of AI and automation. And because AI is so hot right now, it's like, oh, we'll throw AI at it. Like, you're actually talking about automation with what you want to do, right? And then that introduction of AI bias is something that really terrifies me. There's a whole other panel discussion that could be had on that alone, for sure.
I mean, people have to understand that AI or any technology is simply an enabler for you to do your job better, right? I always make a joke about how, like, when I was a kid, I had a TV guide, and now I have a guide on my TV. And like, that is the goal of technology, to make my life easier and to be better. And AI is absolutely no different. So we can throw AI at every single problem we want to, but the reality is, who cares, right? Unless it does something better and makes your purpose easier to deal with, who cares?
Yeah. Do you guys want to weigh in on some other risks?
We're at a CISO forum, so I think what I would recommend is policy, right? So first, monitoring for utilization of these large language models, and then establishing just policy that can't be shaken, that's okay. If you utilize or you put company data, proprietary information, personal information into one of these models, it's grounds for termination. There's no exception, because that is a massive security violation that you can't close. You can't undo that. You've given it away, it can be taken right back out. And the same thing is, we worked with our intelligence labs on, okay, well, what are the 5 predictions we see for the biggest concerns for the next year? One of the primary ones was utilization of AI-generated code. And so there should be a policy that you should implement if you utilize code, which is if you put AI-generated code into production, just pull it out and put it in, that's also grounds for termination. Because you have malicious actors that are out there maliciously training these models right now to input vulnerabilities into the code they're going to produce. And then you go out and you generate that code, you pull it out, put it straight to production, you've just put a massive vulnerability right into your production environment that's going to be utilized. And they're going to know for it. And they're going to know it as well because they're looking for it. So, generating those policies, establishing those policies, making sure that people know that there's no, we're not going to forgive you for this because we can't fix this right now. And then also, treating people to, again, say, this is okay to use as something to help you, but this is not something that you should use to do your job for you. And also be prepared that, don't cross that line between how is it helping me versus is it just making my job more difficult? Because I do think that it should be something that, makes our job easier. But what we're finding a lot of time is how much time are we spending actually correcting these mistakes and, fixing what AI could have done. I mentioned before that AI detections are just one of the things we use for detections because we found that if we go all in on just AI-based detections, we're spending most of our time just cleaning it up when we could have used traditional methods like signatures or IOCs or behaviors or so many other things to detect and not even worry about AI. So, there are some benefits, but there's a lot of drawbacks as well.
Yeah, AI-generated code is very worrisome to me because I think as you go, if you keep doing that over successive releases, you get further and further away from code that humans can understand. So not only have you programmed in all these backdoors and vulnerabilities, you've also removed the chance that anybody in a code inspection or any other activity, any other quality control activity would even find this. It's enormously scary, but the eternal laziness of the human being cannot be underestimated.
You get code where you go, why the hell did it do it this way? And then you ask AI to correct it, and then after a while, you're just like this spaghetti code where you're like, I have no clue how it's working or why it's doing it this way.
But it works.
Yeah. It's like, just write it in Python from the beginning and you're fine.
Yeah. I'm sensing a very definite theme here among these answers, but let's get Mayuran to talk about it, and then I'm going to tell you guys about the theme I'm detecting here.
So I'm going to build a little bit of what Dana and Chris mentioned. So there's obviously a lot of risk. We know that. We've spoken about it. To your point, Chris, the AI model poisoning is a big risk because what you feed in is what you're going to get out. Now, given that I'm going to put in my lens where we're trying to build this AI model, you put in security controls like as much as you can on these models through that process as you build the AI. So make sure you've got access controls to those AI models. Make sure you encrypt any sensitive information. Make sure any PII that goes in is anonymized. Because the theme is obviously privacy is going to be a big deal. You have PII information going into AI models, which are used to, throw out output back to you. What happens to GDPR? What happens to all that privacy regulation, CCPA? And then you have this whole thing, to your point, Vivienne, code, AI-generated code. There's so much code out there that's copyrighted. Like there's a blurring of that line after a while. When AI starts generating all that code, which of that is copyrighted, which needs to be called out, and which of it is actually code that's proprietary to your organization. So to kind of circle back on that, I think it's not all bad.
It's just mostly bad.
It's been mostly bad. My point, though, is that, if we have reliable AI-generated models internally for an organization, as long as you put some governance around it, you could use it pretty effectively for an organization. Having said that, you don't know how much governance and transparency there are on external outdoor AI models, and that's where the risk is.
Well, that's
transparency.
That's just it. Can you secure open AI? No, you can't. Right? So, the common themes I'm hearing here is that it's about governance, right? Your policies, your acceptable use, and it's also about outcomes. Why are we using this? What is the problem we're trying to solve? You can't make a decision of this magnitude to just chase the new shiny. Why are you doing this? And how do we measure and secure those outcomes? What are the policies and the governance that we use to support that?
OpenAI is a good tool to help you think outside of the box, get kind of that creative mindset going, and get the ball rolling to solve the problem. In the same way that you've got fidget spinners and toys on your desk when you're trying to think of something, that's what it is, right? You're playing around with it, but it shouldn't be what you're trying to use to solve the final problem, if that makes sense. It should be what is getting you on that path of thinking how you're going to solve it and, opening up new ideas, but by no means is it going to be the solution to whatever your problem is.
If you're looking for a good example of AI gone wrong, there's a book called Weapons of Math Destruction, and the book is about high-frequency stock traders that utilize AI algorithms to perform stock trades. When that thing, it's kind of like when the Tesla car reaches the bridge and says turn right, and you go, the problem is these things make millions of transactions in split seconds. And so when the AI reaches a scenario in the stock market that it doesn't know what to do with, people can lose hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in a matter of seconds. And so the whole book is about what happened, in those scenarios, but it does give you an example of the power at which you're working. We look at it as just someone smarter than us, right? A quick way to get an answer. But the reality is the power that it can do and the way it can automate. I was on a panel a while back, and I still think about this. A person said, eventually the only way to fight AI is going to be with AI. And I thought, wow, that's a really, really interesting thing. In the satellite world, as an example, like my ex-girlfriend used to work at another satellite company, and their facial recognition isn't your face. It's the top of your head and your shoulders. So it really talks about, you think about how AI works from a satellite perspective. They have long rifles that can identify a human being positively 2 miles away. I mean, this is the power of what we're really talking about here. We look at it as a great way to tell us a funny dad joke or something, right? But it really can cause mass problems if let out of the box in a way that is not controlled.
And unleashed at scale, right? The speed and scale at which those decisions would be made, we human beings can't even keep up with, let alone curtail.
I thought the copyright example, I never even thought about that in those terms. I'm a developer by background. Coding is an art, right? And it does beg the question of, if you are in a classroom and you copy words from a page and you put it in your own paper, you can't do that. But why do you think you can copy code from someone else's code that is put into production and assume that is actually open source or whatever? So I think there is going to be some really interesting possible copyright type of ownership issues of, this was leaked into AI, it's now being used, but we own the patent on that, and they didn't realize what they walked themselves into. And unfortunately, the employee won't be paying for it. Right. The company themselves will be paying for it.
I think that's a conversation that's long overdue in software development. And if AI is the thing that brings that to the table, then great.
The concept of fighting AI with AI is something we're already seeing right now. Right. So the idea of anomaly detection is based on, you have to create a baseline of normalcy. You have to understand how the environment generally operates. Okay, well, the next generation of a tool like Bloodhound is going to not only identify how to get to your target as quickly as possible and as fast as possible, but also take AI into consideration, because the attackers can also create a baseline of normalcy and say, don't operate outside of these parameters so as to not trigger alerts. So now who has the best baseline of normalcy and who can identify things that are operating outside of that better? It's AI versus AI, and who's got the best AI.
Yeah. I literally watched an anime with my son on the weekend where 2 ninjas had a battle entirely in their minds. and then at the end of it, one of them just toppled over onto the ground. And I was like, what just happened? This is where it's going.
That was a good Bloodhound plug, by the way.
Yeah.
It was good.
So Bloodhound does some very, very cool stuff. But you're right. Wherever, that's the other thing, too. I think when you're talking about governance, we have to be vigilant about our approach to governance, because wherever we set the policy, people will figure out where that threshold is, and okay, if we're going to trigger a DLP event on the 49th time that somebody emails something to themselves, well, then they'll only do it 47 times, right? It happens every single day, and it's not always malicious. Sometimes it's unintentional or well-meaning. Sometimes it's accidental. But wherever we set that line, people will find a way. It's also really interesting to me. I was attending an FSISAC webinar a little while ago about API security. And they were talking about APIs, especially as we use them more and more for our business integration. APIs expose our business logic, right? And that's a really dangerous thing. And then you think about the ability of anything that we put into open AI models, we're exposing more than just business logic there. We could be exposing policies, procedures, proprietary information without knowing it, right? It's a massive exposure, and I think that's one thing that I can't emphasize enough is you have to be very aware of the provenance of the AI technology that you're using. And it's probably not enough to say, oh, I trust Microsoft. I'll get Microsoft to solve all the tricky problems for me. I think this is where, as security and technology leaders, we really have to step up and set some of those guardrails in the governance of these technologies.
I think we sometimes make the mistake of looking at AI as being the end-all, be-all solution to our problem. And I've spent a lot of time, obviously, looking at roles and access allocation inside of environments, et cetera. There is AI is part of the solution. There is being smart, but there is also being clever. And AI can help you be smart, but being clever just takes human beings to think about good examples. I'll give you an example of that. Ping identity, I was talking to a guy a while back, and he goes, it's interesting. He goes, the way that we do user behavior analytics is that if you go in and you try to take money out of an ATM machine, odds are you have your cell phone in your pocket and it's running ping. And so I will look at your geolocation, and if your cell phone is next to that ATM machine, I'll let you take the money out. But if your cell phone is not next to that ATM machine, it's very possible that someone else is trying to take that money out. That to me is being clever. That's not about AI or anything else, but if you add AI onto that, and you look at maybe your behavioral analytics of where you typically get money out of the machine, where you've logged in, all these other types of things, that's where the zero trust umbrella starts to really work. So AI to me is just one swim lane in the smart, clever, combination of what zero trust really is.
And that's when it becomes a pain in the ass when I'm on vacation. It tells me I can't take money out.
You're right, but here's the thing: is like it's a pain in the neck. But the problem is when you're not on vacation and someone takes money out, it's even worse, right? Because now you're getting new credit cards or whatever. So It is unfortunately the game that we're playing. But I think AI is all about insight delivery. It's about insight delivery. Let a human being act upon it. Will we get to anonymity and it will do its own thing? Sure, but I think that's a long way away. But man, our jobs are so much better getting insights. We're governing too much. It's just too much data to find those needles in the haystack. And I think, is it a net positive, net negative? I think undoubtedly it's a net positive. It's just a matter of the human control on it. You know what I mean? And
it is a net positive. It sounds like we're being super negative about AI. We're not being negative about AI. We're just being skeptical, which is what our job is. We're security professionals. We should be skeptical about everything and not just immediately embrace every new technology.
I mean, I worked at Microsoft a while back, and I remember a guy told me, he goes, man, he was a developer. He goes, I remember when Windows came out, and I thought to myself, man, if you can't use command line, you shouldn't be using a computer.
I still believe that.
But think about that, right? But that's kind of, I think it's the same. It's the internet was that way. Email. I mean, every major technological revolution, we are going to have an inhibition to it initially, and we're going to get scared by it. But I do think as humanity takes it on, ideally it will progress. AI is probably the most dangerous one of all, but undoubtedly it's I think, positive.
Just
Myron,
pulling thread on finding that needle in the haystack. One of the best use cases of AI for me is obviously the ability for it to process large amounts of data. Humans, take the classic example of a SOC analyst. It's hard for them to piece together little bits of information that by itself doesn't mean much. You put them together, so user coming in, logging in, exfiltrating some backup, changing the password. Those events by itself doesn't mean anything, but you put them together within a short period of, say, 10 minutes, that's a potential, an indicator of compromise for a potential breach. And I think that's where I think, one of the use cases I see it going is, and especially, natural language processing. You don't need to know query language anymore to query the SIM. All you do is just, I should be able to just go up to the SIM or the LLM and say, hey, give me all the incidents that took place for this user account, and there you go. It's just like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the big use for security, at least in the immediate future, is going to be.
Natural language processing, I think is really, there's a ton of potential there without necessarily opening yourself up to the risk of generative AI. Things like lateral movement across the network, you can't, I mean, we're still fighting to detect that. And you can't unless you're actually able to chain together all those events. That's the only way, that kind of offense chaining, that's the only way you see the kill chain, right? And having the visibility, but then being able to discern that from your log and event data, that's the thing that we're continuing to chase in security operations centers, for sure. Okay, we have a few minutes left. We have 5 minutes left, so I think that's about enough time for us to end with some closing thoughts. So the question I would pose to you guys is, what are the things that people should be looking for if they want to use trustworthy AI, if they want to do this responsibly? What are the things to be aware of? What should you be looking for? What would the hallmark of a responsible use of AI for cybersecurity be for you? Blue sky. In an ideal world, what would we be able to do?
I think it's fit for purpose, right? When you look at how a company is using AI, as long as it's fit for purpose, I feel very comfortable with it. And now in a military setting, in a satellite setting, in an identity security setting, user behavior analytics setting, there's a lot of ways in which we can use it. But I do think, again, it goes back to AI should be an enabler for the technology and really nothing else. So that would be my thought.
Any vendor of artificial intelligence that tells you that this tool or this AI is going to replace your people, I generally say thank you for the T-shirt and the discussion, because that's the opposite of what you want. So going forward, it is the utilization of AI to empower people, to help people to make their job and their life easier, but not to replace people. And that should be how we look at this as we continue to develop AI. Like, anytime we go down the path of how are we going to replace people with this, we're going down the absolute wrong path that's going to cause more problems. So how are we starting from the ground up and looking for opportunities to incorporate people with AI to evolve people, make it easier on them, but not cut them out of the equation, because that's just going to be a failure.
Yeah. AI in general for me, you can't get away from it. It's here to stay. We just got to figure out a way of responsibly and ethically using it. One of the things that I think, first of all, transparency of whatever goes into those models. Try and find out what it is, because if it's, and I think you mentioned, Dana, about the whole bias, like, you're just going to skew that model even more if you get the wrong sort of information in it. So the one thing that I would push for is something that we're trying to do internally is, building an AI model internally, make sure you have all the right stakeholders. It's not just security, or it's not just the developers. Make sure you have security, you have the programmers, you've got legal, you've got privacy. They're all stakeholders that need to be part of it, because there's all those implications that are tied in cross-functionally. Engage them, make sure you've got, as much as you can, the governance around it, and, try and just build it up from there.
Okay. So I think the key message is proceed, but maybe don't take the tinfoil hat off yet. Okay, I think that we're at time, or very, very close to. I want to thank you guys all. This panel has been an absolute blast. I don't know if I feel a little less queasy about AI, but I certainly enjoyed the discussion and the time spent with you. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And I believe we're on a break now, so let's go pet some.